Okay, I guess it's time to get started again. So I'm very happy to introduce our guest speaker today, Dr. Marko Turpeinen. Marko leads a data economy company, 1001 Lakes, and he's also an adjunct professor at Aalto University. Among others, Marko has previously worked at MIT Media Lab, led EIT Digital in Finland, and some of us may remember contribution to HIIT as the leader of the Network Society research program earlier. So, without further ado, please, the floor is yours, Marko.
Thank you. Really big pleasure for me to be here. So, as an HIIT alumni or still connected, I guess. I'm going to talk about why do we trust AI? When should we trust AI? What are we willing to give out from our own capabilities of acting and decision making to AI? So that's going to be my topic for today. For those who don't know me, so really briefly, so my background, kind of a mixture of academia and industry, and as you saw in the first slide, so still I'm not able to decide, so I'm running a company. We have a 10 people company specializing in issues around data and artificial intelligence. That's called 1001 Lakes. And I'm also continuing and working at Aalto, computer science department as an adjunct professor. For example, teaching a course there which is called digital ethics, and we have one instance of that course running at the moment, and tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock again, so we will have about the same amount of students then there to discuss things around digital ethics. And one of the things that my story today will have is a bit of a, for me, a trip down the memory lane, going back actually to the very early days of my research career, and then moving from there to the day or the moment where we are now, and picking up things here and there, and let's see how this goes. Yeah, indeed, at HIIT, so I was from 2002 to 2007, when HIIT was really still quite young combination of the two very strong universities joining forces, and the Network Society program then was one of the programs that the institute was, fostering, and I think around 50 researchers. Julia might remember better, but around that, number. So we had at our heyday as part of Network Society. But this might sound a little bit like a, weird way to start, but how many of you know Jussi? One Jussi here knows Jussi. Great. One person in this room knows Jussi Karlgren. So Jussi actually is a professor at KTH, where I also spent quite some time in the media technology department as a professor, and has actually been here at University of Helsinki as a docent for quite some time. And he's a linguist, very good one. And the reason why I'm bringing Jussi here up is that, and I will come back to him a little bit later as well, but the starting point is actually this kind of a report that he made at KTH in 1990, where he kind of, just introduced this idea that what if we have this automated system that kind of, they gather information about interests of different people, and then you have kind of a system that can either recognize features of items that those, people could be interested in, or then kind of find similarities between people's interests. Not that much knowing about the items, but just looking at the similarities between the people's interests. So this is a recommendation system. How many of you have heard of a recommendation systems? Pretty much everybody. If you think that advertising, online advertising, I know it's a little bit of a stretch of an envelope, but not that much. If you think that online advertising is also a recommender system. So I would say that Jussi Karlgren with this idea, well, half Finn, half Swede, by far is the most economically important idea that any Finn has ever had. If you just look at the amount of money that is now made of online ads, for example, and how all of these Netflixes and Amazons and, you know, every single thing that has a recommender, well, it's a pretty big business. But the interesting follow-up here, and why I'm bringing this up, not because, well, I mean, you should know Jussi Karlgren. The story is that, well, he then thought that, well, I could write an academic paper about this. And he did. A couple of years later, actually, I think he was 92, published a paper. It got rejected. And the reason why it got rejected was the reviewers unanimously said, cool idea, enormous privacy problems. Ethically, you know, doesn't sound like a good idea. Jussi thought, exactly, yeah, I agree. So he dropped the whole thing. Never did anything more on recommenders. But here's the thing. He had this thought that, okay, if I go this route, that might not be the right thing for the society. Keep that thought. When does a researcher think that way? And is it always only because you get, you know, maybe rejected because of your paper doesn't get approved? But anyway, that's just one starting point for today. And myself, around that time, I was a budding researcher finishing my master's thesis at Helsinki University of Technology, early 90s, and then joined this project then that was called Electronic Newspaper. And we very early on then got introduced to MIT Media Lab, which was kind of interesting. There were connections that the Finnish media companies had at that time to MIT, and then some people came over to one of the events that we organized. Shosta Sulonen, my professor then from the university, asked me to organize a big session, and one of the speakers was Walter Bender from MIT Media Lab. And then one of the stories that Walter was telling was that, well, we can have this personalized newspaper. So it's not only that we can do everything online, electronically, but we can personalize all of the things that people will see. That was the idea of this prototype that they were building, or a working system actually, that was working in MIT campus around 93, 94, called FishWrap. And that led me to my master's thesis, and at the same time I thought that, well then at the same time AI is kind of cool and what's going on, and there was this new idea, or at least for me it was new, that we could have these agents, software agents that actually kind of represent people, and they roam about and collect information and do things on our behalf. And you can have multiple of them, so you have multiple kind of an architecture of agents that talk to each other and coordinate and do things on behalf of the user. So this is what I wrote my master's thesis on in '95. The paper that is next to this, Architecture for Agent-Mediated Personalized News Service, is my first ever academic paper that was in London in '96. In a conference that was called the First International Conference on Practical Application of Intelligent Agents and Multi-Agent Technology. And again, I'm not saying this here now, like now, well, you might have heard of agents in the couple of, previous years now, again, and then if one would have been kind of waiting for the software agents to kind of actually pop up as a major theme, so it would have been a long wait. But I'm also kind of showing that, well, in this research cycle, so really, ideas come up, they pop up, they blossom, and they might not be ready yet. And again, this sort of, when is the infrastructure ready? When are we ready as a society? When is the technology ready? All of those need to fit in place. Anyway, this is what I did pretty much exactly 30 years ago, so in 96. And then I joined MIT Media Lab. I went there for another master's thesis and was a student at the Media Lab. And it was an interesting time to be there because really one of the kind of hotspots of everything digital in the late 90s, one of the leaders in the world of kind of where the whole field of things around digital is going. I don't know if Media Lab still has that same reputation, probably much less so, but at that moment it really was an interesting place to be. One of the things, again, that I did there was related to agents. Patty Mars, she's still at the Media Lab, so she was leading then a group called Software Agents. And again, thinking, talking about recommenders. So this is a paper that Patty and one of her students, Upendra Shardanand, wrote. Again, I think it was in '95, which is one of the seminal papers of the whole story of recommendation systems. One interesting thing, by the way, here that I recognize that the ResearchGate does is that it actually updates the current affiliation of the person. So Upendra definitely was not working for Meta in 1995. Facebook was founded in around 2006 and so forth. But that also gives you a little bit of a link. So this researcher, which by the way, this was pretty much the only paper Upendra ever wrote, which has been cited something like 3,000 times. So then decided to move to the industry, and I don't know how much he has been working on things around advertising, for example, but definitely probably has had an impact as a researcher then in that side. But then actually the person that I really wanted to mention from my time at the Media Lab was my actually my office mate when I went to the lab, and then he had been there for a couple of years already, John Orwant. Really clever guy, very interesting guy. He had started working on user modeling around '92, and then had published several papers. He called it doppelganger. So everybody has this, well, you might call it a digital twin. He called them doppelgangers that kind of try to all the time monitor what we do and build, again, like as rich, as kind of concrete, as good profile of us as we possibly can of the users. So kind of one of the very early researchers in digital user modeling. Then when I went there, and this is John, so he actually said that I dropped that whole thing. I can't do it. I really can't do it. It's just too risky. The privacy problems, again, enormous. I dropped the whole thing. So he did. Finished his doctoral thesis on some, I don't quite remember exactly what. It was on it was no-code programming languages. He was very good at Perl at that time and wrote several O'Reilly books and everything on Perl. But then he also worked on no-code interfaces for programming. So that was Orwant's doctoral thesis. But what's kind of interesting still is that he went through several phases in his career. He was at O'Reilly, he was at France Telecom, but then he started working for Google. I think he has now left Google. It says ex-Google here, by the way. This is very fresh from LinkedIn. But he has worked in Google for quite some time. And guess what? I mean, over the last, again, 5 to 10 years, which company in the world has done the most of actually bringing the doppelgangers to us. By far, that's Google. If you think of what Gemini does for us now, what kinds of information it can collect about us, it's pretty staggering. And yeah, I think, way beyond what John was ever imagining when he was doing his research at the lab. And I'm not saying that he had worked on like kind of personalization features or kind of user model inside of Google. And again, like this is not a critique on John's earlier kind of, let's say, ethical viewpoint as such. But it also kind of shows that we as a researchers and kind of the paths we take and kind of what are the ethical choices that we make, well, in the real world, it's a little bit perhaps more complex. But this kind of discussion with John comes to my mind often because I hadn't heard of that kind of thing before. That somebody says, I'm a leader in the world in this topic, and drop, because I don't think that this is ethically sound. Well, on the, let's say, personal data topic, so, well, this is something that I feel a little bit of proud at least, so there have been some things that I've been working on myself over the last 10 years, so there is this kind of a movement that started from my research group called My Data. And one of the ideas with My Data is that, okay, we can actually do something about this imbalance in a way of who gets access to my personal data and how much control do I have on my personal data and how can I enable things around my personal data without being kind of, let's say, subservient to some particular services or so. And, well, without going into more details on My Data, so again, repeating that's something that I'm actually quite proud of. And again, it wasn't me who started this. There were other people like Yogi Poikola and Kai Kuikkaniemi in my team who really pushed this forward, but at least I can say to my credit that I didn't stop them to do that. Then again, how many of you recognize this video? One, Giulio. So Apple Knowledge Navigator, I recommend you take a look. Can be found in YouTube. So this was 1987, kind of a concept of where we are headed. And as concept videos goes that the industry does, so I think this is really interesting. It has several things that have, really stood the kind of, it still works to a large degree. And it's interesting to watch that how close we are to the actual vision that was in Knowledge Navigator. The idea in Knowledge Navigator is that there is this really personalized interface that is kind of following your every step, and it gives you all the kind of augmentation in your life, and then is this really fluid interaction with other people, and kind of adds in several different ways to everything that you do in your working life. And then the question, of course, is that, well, how far are we from this vision now with everything that AI is doing, and is there some kind of a mismatch also in kind of, okay, we actually went to a route that is much less about us being kind of like augmented from the point of view of our knowledge creation, and AI is doing something quite different for most people. So that's one thought, at least for me, when I look at this video now. But yeah, recommended viewing. But then jumping from there to another, let's say, masterpiece of media. So if the previous one was kind of the optimistic story of, this is where we are going, this is how this whole AI will augment our intelligence. My favorite film, Space Odyssey 2001 by Stanley Kubrick, and this kind of sentence that, I'm sorry, Dave, but I just can't do that. So how far are we from that moment, or are we in many ways already in it? The AI systems that we are using, we can say that they are given guardrails, so that they are kind of helping us to not to overstep, not to do things that we are not supposed to do with the AI tools. But it's not so far from the situation that actually the AI tool itself decides, no, you should not be doing that. And in which situations the machine is already actually in this role, Dave, you should not do that. Hey, at this moment, I thought I would ask your input a little bit. So maybe you know the system. By the way, this is Kai Kuikkaniemi from my research team who originally created this system called Presemo. But go to Presemo, take your mobile phone, your laptop, and whatever. And so presemo.aalto.fi/digital ethics happens to be the address that I'm using also for my course. And the question is, what are your main concerns regarding AI? And if you want to chat with your neighbor, you know, maybe a minute or two about this, so feel free. But then just post your main concerns and let's see what comes up. I'm moderating, so I give you a few minutes. This is great. So why don't you then, I mean, you have kind of a voting option there. So if you press plus, just next to things that others have written, so then you can vote. I didn't manage to see whether I got the same things many times, but yeah. So a couple of moments for voting. Half a minute more. Oh, I have the same. Okay, fantastic. So, well, what I see here is that you are very worried about our, overall capability of being smart and being creative, and so that it's robbing us of our kind of some of the basic qualities of being a human, And that's, of course, serious. Privacy comes up, security comes up, being over-dependent on AI. Then there is this story that is repeated a lot in the media, and I think there is some truth to it about kind of, is AI taking our jobs away? But that's a complicated story, very early to tell still, and the history tells that, you know, we as a society and industries are really good at implementing or kind of innovating around what kinds of jobs people can have. But it will change the jobs that we have pretty, you know, that's pretty obvious. And can we trust? Trustworthiness came up as well. Everything will be somewhat sloppy. That's related to this sort of kind of decline of our abilities, but also this sort of maybe robbing some originality or creativity away from us. Thank you. That's great. So, back to Jussi Karlgren. So this is what Jussi is doing now. So instead of working actually fully at Stockholm University, he was at KTH earlier, then he moved to Stockholm University and is a docent here. But currently he's also, well, it says actually that he's professor here. Well, that's news to me. And he's a principal AI scientist at Silo, which is kind of interesting. And clearly now having an impact again in the society, which is really cool. Fun fact, I have not been in touch with Jussi for a long while. I met him when I was at KTH in Sweden, and actually today there was a meeting of something called Aalto, which is a European thing where language technology players are kind of getting together in different countries, and the Finnish team of Aalto was in an online meeting just before this at 2 o'clock. So Jussi Karlgren was there. I haven't been in a meeting with him for more than 10 years, and I had prepared this presentation already yesterday. But so Jussi is now also working on something called Good AI Lab. I hadn't heard of this, but it's kind of interesting again. So we have a team of like researchers and professors around Europe, maybe 20-something of them, joining forces and saying, okay, so we together want to create this environment where we you know, bring AI to things that create social good. And so there is really sort of strong statement, strong mission that this is what the research want to do. So really this sort of ethos that you want to be ethical around AI. And that's great. And I'm completely supporting these kinds of things. But then I go back a little bit to Silo and the story of Silo. And this is a couple of years old, so this was when Silo Gen was the thing, and they kind of, you know, advertised that they have an LLM, and now this will be a big thing. And so if I take from this press release that was in August 23, so you have these words like, well, Silo is great because it's based on European values, it's based on digital sovereignty ideas, it's trusted, it's secure, it's transparent, provides equal access, accountability, equitable approach. So all of these are very nice. But to me, it still leaves this question that, well, when we talk about AI that is sovereign and trustworthy and transparent and responsible and all of these good things, so what do we actually mean? What is the thing that we are not trusting? What is the thing that is sovereign? What is the thing that is accountable and explainable and so forth? And some of you are probably AI researchers, and you have a really strong idea on some of these ideas are, and maybe you are working on this yourself. But I still want to raise this question that, again, like, if we are supposed to make AI something that we can trust, something that is transparent, something that is responsible, so what is the thing that we are trusting, and what is the thing that should be transparent, and so forth? There are frameworks that try to make this more explicit. I actually like this work a lot. This was done by a high-level expert group at the EU level, I think about a little bit more than 5 years ago, that provides these ethical guidelines for trustworthy AI. And then at the top you have, like, you need to have lawful and robust and ethical AI. And then the ethical part sort of it breaks down into ethical principles. You have to have respect for human autonomy, prevention of harm, fairness, and explicability. And then that again breaks down into different kinds of requirements, like human agency and oversight. And you need to have technical robustness and privacy and transparency and so forth. Similar things that were in the previous story that Silo used also in their marketing message. And again, nothing wrong with this framework as such. But again, like, going a couple of levels deeper, what is it that we are trusting? And then, well, this is actually the lady that was partially making this previous document, Kathleen Müller. We don't know what these systems are trained on, how they are being built. All of this happens behind closed doors, commercial companies, and this is worrying. This was 21, 22. And then there is this question, of course, of the data that we use for training. I like this to show this as an example because I think it's at the same time it's very illuminating and it's kind of funny. So here is this guy, Simon Weckert, who had this, it was sort of artistic piece, kind of performance. So he walked very slowly through Berlin with this red carriage behind him and just walked around. But the thing was that this red carriage was filled with mobile phones. So what this meant for systems like Waze or Google Maps and everything was that the traffic is completely blocked in those streets. And he just, the point was to show that, well, I mean, if you want to, you can relatively easily create data that makes these systems to, think that the world is something that is not. Then there is this other story, how reliable is your model? And the story goes that, well, if you have a machine learning system like in this case, which is meant for military purposes, and you trained it with pictures of tanks, both from US and from Russia. And then you build the model, so the model comes up with kind of the logic that all of the pictures that are fuzzy are from Russia. And it's kind of logic because, that's the quality of the pictures. I can imagine that this is what the system does. The interesting story also here is that I don't know if this has ever been actually happening in a military context. I picked this up from Risto Siilasmaa, who at some point was the chairman of the board of Nokia Corporation, was really promoting that everybody should understand machine learning. He used this example. It turns out that this example is probably a hoax. It never actually, there is no real case where this happens, but it kind of, it sort of illustrates the point that if you have certain kind of data, which in this case is sort of, skewed because of the quality of the pictures, then you might have completely different results than you would expect. That's the point. But then a more recent example, which I'm also very proud of. So here, Matti Nelimarkka acting here in this university quite a bit. How many of you know Matti? About half of you, great. Also has been active in my research group for quite a while. So Matti recently created this LLM, taking a base LLM, which is GPT-2, I think an older version of GPT, actually then adding some things and mixing and matching. But yeah, he sort of created his base LLM. And then on the side, he created this Marxist LLM that was taught with all of the materials from Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels and sort of, yeah, what happens if you give LLM a Marxist view of the world. And it's interesting reading. He just got a paper published in Big Data and Society, fine-tuning a language model with a Marxist worldview. And it's a solid piece of research, maybe with slight humorous tone, but still it's serious because, again, I mean, showing how easy it is to create these AI systems, which clearly are biased. So he makes it very, very explicit in a nice way. There was also this one part that I really enjoyed was this, that then he also created, using a bit of a, yeah, some algorithmic magic, this sort of axis of things that are, you know, good versus evil in this model. Of all things, you could map things that the LLM knows on this axis of are they evil or good from the point of view of what does the LLM, you know, see how it sees the world. And the story is that then for the Marxist LLM, so kind of ranking that from the kind of lowest of the low to the, you know, best profession that you could have. So obviously worker comes up as the best in the world, and consultant comes up as the worst in the world. Me doing consultancy work recently, so that's a little bit alarming. But anyway, and here again, I mean, well, there clearly were no consultants around when Marx and Engels were writing their texts. So something is going on inside the system, figuring out that, well, yeah, maybe the overall impression of consultants plus then this sort of a viewpoint. And then it's kind of also interesting that capitalist doesn't, you know, that is somewhere in there in between. Matti says that he will try this with more later, like Llama and others, and see whether he will get the same results. But I like this a lot. But it kind of is showing this that, okay, and you know this, models, you feed them with kind of data, then they come up with very different interpretations of the world. Which leads me to another story that has to do with Marx. So this is actually a paper that was published by researchers from School of Information at UC Berkeley, Jenna Burrell and Marion Fourcade, and they talk about coding elite. And it's easy to talk about coding elite in the Bay Area, Silicon Valley area, because sure, yeah, coding elite. And they paint the picture of, well, we have this sort of special group of individuals who are able to kind of get it and then are in the position to influence what we are getting. And he calls them, or they, not he, she and she, they call it coding elite. And then I'm borrowing this again from Matti Nelimarkka because I think this is good. So this was the original picture well, this is kind of the story that Burrell and Fourcade are promoting, that we have developers, and I could include then researchers and scientists who are, you know, making algorithms, so in the same group. Coding elite, who can code, who have their opinions, who have their values, and those opinions and values then they influence the information systems that are being created. The user interfaces, the algorithms, the data and AI model, the data that get picked, the AI models that get, you know, used, all of these are influenced by the opinions and values of the developers. But what Matti brought to this is that, well, hold on. So actually, Well, there's the organization that these developers typically, when they are in the business world, or even if you're in academia and you're kind of influenced by your peers, and so there is this organization of people who have their values and their goals and their opinions, and if it's meta, so maybe the goal is just to make a lot of money. And then they come up with definitions and requirements and kind of user personas and user stories, and this is what you should build the system for. So the developers, in a way, are conduits to what the organization behind them or who are hiring them are willing them to do. So it's more complicated than just saying that there is a coding elite. So there are organizations that these people belong to. And the coders or the developers are then interpreting all of the time that, well, what are the intentions of the organization? And then there is the next thing. So especially when we talk about machine learning, so everybody here, as users of all of these systems, we are influencing how these systems behave all the time. So it's the collective actions of pretty much everybody who are using these systems that influence what those systems do. So it's very often that we have these situations that, no, this organization actually didn't want this to happen. It was not meant to behave in this way. But actually what happens was that because people behave in a certain way, the system learns to adapt to that and even reinforce that. That's the way how these systems are built, how the algorithms are often built. So this is, really complex interaction with all of the different users that are using the system that influences what the AI is actually doing. And then you have the dialogue between the customers of these organizations, the users of these organizations, and kind of the organizations are analyzing how the different services are being used. So there's a kind of back channel there, which comes not through the system maybe as such always, but more like directly from the different ways how the organizations are trying to tap into what the people actually would like to do. Some of that is analyzed in the system itself, but not all of it. And then at the end, you have the whole bigger frame of regulation and societal values and public debate. Societal values are not the same here in Finland than they are in China. Regulation in Europe is not the same as it is in US. So here, I guess, and I don't have a kind of any simple answer to this, and the point here is that I'm trying to make also is that when we say that we need to have trustworthy AI of this very complex socio-technical algorithmic system that I'm talking about here, what is it that we are actually trusting? What part of this system at any given point is the thing that we are supposed to trust? And I leave you with that question at least a little bit. And another thing, again, Matti likes to point this out as well, is that, well, if you think about the value base of the humanity, of the, us, everybody in this planet, and, for example, map this into this sort of an axis of survival versus self-expression and traditional versus secular values. So Finland, Sweden, Norway, we are very, very much here in the top right corner. High self-expression, well, not based on the society that is very much, driven by religion, for example. And then you have US, which is much more here in the middle. You might have China, which is kind of higher up, actually, in kind of being non-secular or less traditional, but then much less self-expression. And when you talk about, okay, well, what are the values of given developers, for example, or given organizations, you cannot just, not consider the fact that we have very different value base in various different parts of the globality. And again, where is the AI created? who creates the AI is definitely influenced by this heterogeneity. Then my last thing, so going to agentic part of the story again. So this is a slide that I took from Gartner, and as I already said before, so probably most of you here in this room have heard of agentic AI in the last couple of years. So in this slide, Gartner is painting that, okay, so agency, that's the story when organizations, first of all, are granting rights to AI to do things on their behalf. So it's the organization that does it, and it kind of entrusts organizations to make decisions on their behalf, and without human instruction, without human oversight. And sure, that's one way to think about it, and we kind of move from augmenting humans to augmented machines. Okay. But if you take the definition of agency as such, so it's the abstract principle that, well, whatever we have as an autonomous entity that we can call an agent, being some kind of a thing, how much are they able to act by themselves? And then the questions that have a lot to do now with the development of AI and the development of agentic AI are these, that what are the things that we as humans really want the agents to take over? Or where do we want to give the agency to these systems? And when will we be comfortable that this happens, that they make decisions for us? Under what circumstances would we like to do that? So here is another question for you, a simple one. Let's see. Go back to Presemo. I'll just activate this. So, a really simple poll. By 2035, will systems powered by AI be designed to allow humans to easily be in control of most tech-aided decision-making that is relevant to their lives? And now I'm not talking about the organizations, I'm talking about the individual humans. And I'll give you a few moments to decide, but this is an easy one to answer in a way. I emphasized there a couple of words too much, so that might result, but well, I think it's already starting to be quite clear. Please vote if you like more, but your vote says clearly no. So 3 against 17, no. You don't think that this is going to be the future, that AI is designed in such a way that we feel that we are in control. We can, it really is supporting us in a positive way in our decision making. There was a study, and I'm taking this from a study by Pew Research Center that was out there a few years back, and I thought it was interesting because, it was about this question. When are we willing to give agency over to digital systems, and under what conditions? And interestingly, and again, this is a few years back, 23, 24, around that time, at that time, the research/expert, it was a broad community. There were, a lot of people that were asked, 540 to be exact. So they were pretty split. So 44% said yes, 56% said no. You said about 80% no. I think that's interesting. Has something changed over the last 2 or 3 years? There were some people that I could quote also from the study, Alfred, a Finnish professor who has been in Denmark, or at least in 23, 24, I haven't checked, was in Denmark. So what he said is that, we have this future which is clearly cut in both ways. So yes, the systems will help, and data will help. We will be able to make better human decision making, but on the other hand, it continues to be this sort of black box type, so it's non-transparent. It sort of takes the agency, to a certain degree at least away, and we don't quite know why the things that are happening are happening. And then there is this other one, which I thought was also pretty good, so kind of that world will be complex in 23 or 35 as well, and it's not so much that humans be able to kind of use these systems and will they help us to make decisions, but it's going to be very uneven. So for some, they will be really useful and they will kind of empower some individuals much more than others, and that was, I think, a fair observation as well. And then, of course, you need to ask ChatGPT, what does ChatGPT think about this? So will you be able to kind of provide us the trustworthy and give the balance right with the decision making? And interestingly, here comes up this need for control, a need for regulation. And for example, that it's better in Europe and in highly regulated sectors, and in other countries or other regions where there is less regulation, and in kind of areas like consumer platforms and insurance and credit policing and so forth. So you will clearly have this sort of unbalanced situation that you don't really get this sort of strong feeling of support and help in your decision making from these systems. That's what ChatGPT said to me, I think, the day before. But in the end, and this is my colleagues from 1001 Lakes, Olli Pitkänen and Sami Jokela, so the whole story is that we do need governance for AI in all of these different phases, be it when we make these models, when we fine-tune them, when we distribute the benefits from the models, when we kind of use the models and gather data about the usage of AI, and then when the models create some output. For all of these different phases, so we need more rules, better policies, better ways to control what is going on in all of these different phases. Rights, duties, liabilities in all of these processes. And then there are efforts like EU AI Act, which is on us pretty much now. And so where we, in Europe, try to regulate this by having risk levels. And okay, if you are a higher risk system, so then you need to be able to report on how you mitigate those risks and so forth. And it has all kinds of complexities, but I think to a certain degree it is very much a step in that direction, that we would like to be as humans still much better in control of what these different AI systems are and can do. Then there is this story of, how are these being trained, and happens to be close to what I've been doing recently as well. We are one of the partners in this European project called Trusted European Media Data Space, where one of the main use cases is training AI models with media data that is coming from media companies. Stories provided by journalists and so forth. And there is the story of like New York Times, for example, suing all of these AI companies. But again, why I'm saying this is that this links back not only to what we can trust and how can we make systems that we can trust, but what kind of implications we are having with these AI systems when they're also maybe eroding away from kind of very fabric of what are the systems that we have built to create trust in this in this world that we are living in, for example, journalism. So if you take kind of all of the fruits of journalism without any compensation and train the AI models with it, which is what has been happening over the last years, so we are headed for problems. And then you can have like, let's throw some technology in to control the technology. This was a paper, actually a colleague that I know quite well from the Netherlands called Maurits Kaptein and his team. So they just recently published this work on kind of runtime governance of AI agents, policies on paths, and how kind of you can have these, well, very stringent policies and guardrails at any given time when the different agents are acting that, well, is the next step going to be something which is actually creating a problem, and then kind of checking against that. And actually Maurits and co are also, they have started a company called Kivu on this. And all of this, so it's all about kind of, you know, being in control. Can we be in control? And to finish, so a couple of years back, so there was this initiative that, well, this is going way too fast. Way too fast. Let's push pause and reflect what's going on. This was 23. If anything after that, well, there is Thames actually starting, so sorry about that. So if anything after that, so we have clearly not pushed the pause button. We have pressed on the accelerator pedal and hard. So now the question is, what can be done in terms of like actually being able to trust, actually being able to have the control on what AI is when we are living in this world where there's enormous arms race and huge resources are put into making the next generation of these AI tools. That's what I want to leave you with. Thank you. Hey, any questions, comments at this moment? I know I used pretty much all of my time. Hi, Giulio. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
A lot of
Yeah, and very different viewpoints across the Atlantic. Well, on the first one, and kind of, well, what's the data that we are using? So completely right, and also, of course, one thing that is absolutely making this story worse is that, well, the AI is also part of the problem. It's so easy now to create also so much more data that is fed back to all of these AI systems. So it's kind of a really complex, you know, reinforcing loop in itself, that all of this AI generated materials and misinformation and slop and whatnot is now actually being kind of, you know, it's part of the learning system, and what does that do to all of these systems in the future is a really interesting question. Then the other aspect of this sort of differences between the value systems in various parts of the globe, and it obviously has been there all the time when all of these digital things have been built, that we are coming from different bases, but I don't think has it ever been as pronounced as now. I mean, and it's not only that, well, the current US, top level is what it is, but really as a basis of where are we going to find kind of a common path towards some kind of a, basis of AI systems where we are building them in some kind of a joint value basis or ground, doesn't look like that at all at the moment. And then, well, is Europe now able to lead in kind of turning this critical view also into some kind of a positive force of having AI, which is somehow more under control? Well, jury is obviously out on that one, and it's has a lot to do with people like you in this room. Okay, well, yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead, Petter. Sure. Sure. Well, it's true. I mean, the concept of trust has, of course, been studied for a long while, and it is very complex. And in addition to what you just mentioned, as couple of okay, can we do like mathematically sounded proof for things that we can then therefore trust to be true, versus like humans talking to humans and building trust. So there is a very wide variety of other kinds of trust building. For example, I've been in this business of building data ecosystems lately, where organizations, and again, there are humans inside the organizations, but the whole story is much more this, that, well, how do the organizations learn to trust each other enough so that they are kind of able to come up with a common basis and common rules and common understanding that, okay, under these conditions, again, we can use each other's data. And to me, it's just yet another dimension on the aspect of trust and trustworthiness. In this talk, I guess one of the key points that I'm trying to make is that if you just say then that, sort of the algorithmic side, that, you kind of blame the algorithm. Can this algorithm be trusted? So that's not enough. That's not the system we are talking about. It's one part, maybe even a tiny part of the entire system that then is the thing that when we talk about all of these complex systems, so what we are then putting our trust on. And how are we better able to understand that kind of phenomena of not trusting and trusting, I think will be one of the crucial things in how this whole scene of artificial intelligence will evolve. But thanks. Very good question.